This is a Harbor Freight Chicago Electric 12-inch miter saw. I'm going to show how to fix one of the very irritating features of this saw. It has a laser line guide for the blade. The problem is the line guide only comes on when the saw blade is turning. So if you're trying to line up a board on the line, you've got this blade spinning and the noise, and it's just very, very poor design. So what I'm going to show is how to add a switch right in here so that you can push a button, turn on the laser, get it lined up, and then release the button and turn on the saw. I have a switch here that I got from an online source. I'll put the part number for the switch. It comes without wires on it. You have to solder the wires on yourself. So I soldered the wires on, put a little bit of a shrink tube on it. That'll go up in the handle. You'll need wire strippers, wire cutters, not necessarily, you could probably use the wire strippers. You need a little bit of solder. You'll need some shrink tube. These are the nuts and washer to hold the switch in the handle. You need a soldering iron and some type of Phillips tip screwdriver to pull the screws out of the handle. Now, on this saw that holds this handle together, there are 2 screws in this handle. There's 2 screws in here that hold this part of the plastic on, and then there's 5 screws on the bottom here. So you need to take all those out to access the switch. So I'll show how to do that. I like to use my battery impact. Two screws for the handle. I'm going to set that aside. Now these next 2 screws are interesting in that they are non-magnetic. You see, they won't be lifted up from my magnetic tip. One trick I learned, if you put it ever so slightly side load on the screw, you can get it to come out a little further and grab it. But see, it is slightly magnetic. I couldn't pull it out earlier. That's those 2, and now we have the 5 that are in the handle. I'm going to lower the saw and latch it down. Now the handle just lifts off. There's a little bushing in the back here for the cord that fits in this notch. You have to lift that out, and now we can gain access. Okay, inside the handle are 2 wires. This one and this one, which are the power coming up. Well, one of them's the power coming up to the switch that turns on the saw. So we want to determine which one is the hot, which one's the switch light going back. So I have what's called an inductive voltage tester here. So you can see this wire has power to it. This wire does not. So this is the hot. This is the one we need to tap into for our switch. We're going to cut in here. We're going to strip off this insulation here and do a splice similar to this one and come off to feed our switch. Now, remember, unplug the saw before you continue further. I've got a razor knife here, and what I'm going to do is strip off this little bit of shrink tube. It's around this joint. Okay, this one is just a crimp joint. We're going to keep this wire, which is the neutral. We're going to keep that attached. All we're going to do is change from this wire, which is the switch leg coming off the on-off switch for the blade, to this one, which is the hot. So we're going to end up tying this to our switch, and then from our switch over to here. Now we need to drill a hole in the handle and mount the switch. Now the handle we removed earlier, it fits on like this, and when you hold it, it seems like right about here would be a good spot for the button. So when you remove this, you'll see right inside here is a nice cavity that the switch will just fit into. So I'm going to use this unibit and slowly drill it out until I get to the size that will fit the switch snugly. Now as I drill out this hole, I want to check and just go one step at a time to make sure that I don't over drill it. So right now it's a little too tight, so we'll go one more step on the step bit. Right there. Clean up the back a little bit. That last step was so close that I'm not going to try and drill it again. I'm going to try and just shave it a little bit with my pocket knife. So close. There we go. Nice clean fit. Now the next tricky part is trying to get this nut and washer to fit in there. Okay, the nut fit on. Let's see if I can. Hey, I got to start. Now the thing is, as it gets in there, as it works down into that plastic, it's gonna, edges of the nut are gonna start hitting on the plastic. I think I can get it tight enough. Yeah. Very nice. So this will run in here, and we'll solder it in. So I'm going to strip off a piece of wire here, the length I need. So I'm going to figure that's going to tuck in there about like that. So cut that. Now I need to strip off enough to wrap around that connector. Let's see. It's 22 gauge wire. There we go. I want to wrap this around here. That looks pretty good. Now we just solder this wire in place. Since this is so big, it's going to suck all the heat out of this little soldering iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it started like that. Then I'm going to come over here to the back side. See if I can do this so that. Okay, now you can see it's hot enough to where maybe I'll put the solder on the top side and it pulls it through the bottom side. So that's good. Okay, let it cool down. Don't let it move or you're going to get a cold solder joint, which means it'll break before it solidifies. After the solder joint is cool, I'm going to take this insulation that I'd stripped off and peeled back. Kinda, if I can do this. This was a shrink tube. Kind of lay it back on there a little bit, and then wrap it with electrical tape. Make sure you use electrical tape. This stuff is rated for 600 volts insulation, although the rest of this is plastic. So that's the first half of our little switch. Now we need the other half of the switch, which is going to tie into the input of the transformer. So this wire here, so what we're going to do is we're going to cut this off, and now we're going to splice our switch wire here onto this. So we need to solder those two together. I'm going to trim that a little bit. And I'm going to twist these two together. Oops. Don't forget this. Sorry. Almost screwed up here. You need to slide a piece of shrink tube onto your wire prior to making this splice. I prefer the shrink tube over electrical tape if you have it. If you don't, electrical tape is fine. So slide your shrink tube on, then twist your wires together like that. Okay, now we just need to solder. Clean off our soldering iron. See if I can do this, keep out of the camera's way. So I like to get it started. There we go. Once you get it started, keep the soldering iron on the bottom side and the solder on the top side. There we go. It's a pretty nice clean solder joint. And then once it cools, you can see that it's no longer quite as shiny. Then we'll slide the shrink tube over and we'll shrink it. Okay, for shrinking, you can use a heat gun, or if you're careful, I've got this little lighter for lighting pilot lights and stuff. So just heat it up and you'll see it shrink. Bend it over, get the other side. There you can see it shrinking up. Okay, that's pretty good. The last bit of cleanup we want to do while we're in here is put a piece of shrink tube on this wire that we had cut off. This will become energized anytime the motor's turned on. So we want to make sure that that can't touch anything and become energized. So we're just going to heat it up, shrink a little piece on it. Okay, and just to neaten things up, I'm going to take a piece of electrical tape and tape that piece to the other wire. Tape this over here. Okay, now we are done. So if I turn this on, let me raise up the saw gently because this is all loose. See, if I push this button now, we should see a laser line come on. It's fairly bright out here, so this may be difficult to see. But now when you see when I push the button, we get a laser line. So it works. When replacing this handle, thing to remember is that this bushing in the back, you need to get that onto the handle first and then start at the front. Slide all this together, and this one snapped on quite easily. Let's plug it in and see if it still works properly. Okay, so laser's on. Pulling the switch. So it works. Laser works. Fantastic. We'll see. Just have the little button there. It's a nice, easy location when you get your hand on the handle. And the entire fix was about $10, including shipping. Thank you for watching.